last time we discussed two major aspects that Sri Krishna described as to things necessary as a part and parcel of individuals' qualities to be ready to get the Atma-Jnana. We said last time, ahimsa, that one should never hurt anyone through the actions, words, and most importantly, even through an individual's thought. It occasionally happens that you hurt somebody, but that hurt should never be deliberate. Why we talked about the quality is important? Because we have to recognize our oneness with everybody. For example, if we accidentally bite our own tongue, knowing that tongue and teeth part and parcel of our own body, we don't get angry with the teeth and behave in an appropriate way. So the same way one has to realize the kind of relationship between us and everybody else around in this creation. Besides, as I mentioned last time, since we do not want to get hurt, we don't want to hurt anybody else. Typical principle of universal value. We talked about the diet, but we emphasize that jivo, jivasya, jivanam. That means nobody can sustain one's life without eating something which is alive. Whether vegetables or meat, still it's a living entity that we eat. And finally, we conclude that section by recognizing that these essential universal values are not absolute. That means they have to be modified depending upon the geographical locations and the laws there, the times that we live in, and the circumstances in a particular situation. A typical Sanskrit word for is desha, kala, paristiti. Again, we reminded ourselves about the need for violence in a way when we perform surgery or during the righteous wars. Yet another important quality that we discussed in great depth was kshama and kshanti. Kshama is an act and kshanti is an attitude. We said it arises from the word Sanskrit ksham, which when translated in simple words, it means patience, endurance, forbearance, and forgiveness. But again, emphasize that forgiveness implies holier than thou attitude, which stems from pride. So kshama is much more than that. That means remaining serene, patient, observing self-restraint under all circumstances, treating everyone with love and compassion, and even to those who may harm you. Remember, kshama, we thought, was not a negative attitude of silent suffering. Rather, it was a positive and constructive attitude of cheerful acceptance by which a person becomes more large-hearted and grows in inner maturity and happiness. And we emphasize that forgiveness and accommodation are very fundamental to all relationships. Harmony and happiness come about when each of a relationship is appropriately maintained. We laughed about the fact that we tend to reduce expectations in our daily life if we practice kshama by accepting the things as they are, by saying we accept the insects, the bugs, Minnesota's annual crop of mosquitoes. We also live through the freezing winters of Minnesota as it's just about to start, and sizzling heat of Arizona summers. We accept the madness of the mad and eccentricity of the foolish without any reaction. We do that because we accept the entities and situations and climates as they are and willing to accept to relate to them. Unfortunately, when it comes to our friends and relatives, we sometimes do not extend them even a fraction of the tolerance that we have for a fool and his crazy antics. A fool may never disappoint us, we said, but friend and relative often does, because we do not give them the same tolerance or accommodation So we concluded then Kshama is absolutely essential for making a spiritual progress and making the individual ready to receive the Atma-Jnana. Kshama and Ahimsa are the saintly qualities, the two topics we discussed last time. And I concluded last session by sharing with you a story of Santa Ekanath, where he ended up taking a bath for 108 times when in the inappropriate behavior of an individual, he did not get mad. Instead, the person came around and asked his forgiveness. As we remember, we've been studying the 13th chapter, and in the 7th verse, he says about 9 qualities which are essential to get the Atma-Jnana in this one single verse. We have studied so far Amanitvam, Adambitvam, Ahimsa, Kshantihi, and Arjavam. And then today you also have discussed in the past Acharya Upasanam, and today now finally come to discussion of Shaucham. Shaucham means purity. Shaucham means purity. There's cleanliness, which is external, internal, and I would add to that environmental as well. External is very easy to understand. Keep our body clean, clothes washed, all the equipment that we use, utensils, the cars, the house, the surroundings, the place of worship, most importantly. It's very important to maintain it absolutely clean. Sometimes we forget the environment plays a tremendous role in our health, both physically and intellectually. So it's absolutely essential to keep the local environment, statewide environment, countrywide environment, and most importantly, the global environment, including air, absolutely clean and clear. And internal shaucham is keeping the mind clean. Sometimes, often is frequently less recognized. And we need to get rid of a few things we tend to have in our mind, which we must get rid of. Those are, everybody talks about kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya. I'll translate them in English and add some more from me. Over-attachment, which sometimes leads to addiction. Anger, totally out of control behavior. Greed, delusion, arrogance coming out of pride, jealousy. Then add to that selfishness, swartha, self-condemnation, guilt, possessiveness, miserliness. These are also uncleanness of our mind, something that we must deal with it. Now, the way to deal with all these things is challenging at best, but we can address that particular situation by a certain technique. That technique has been described as Swami Dayananda taught me by telling that try to use the technique of Pratipaksha Bhavana. That means Prati means opposite, Paksha means side, means point of view, and Bhavana is state of thought or state of mind. That means one should use one's mind and look at the situation by opposite point of view. If someone does inappropriate and acts in such a way that he insults or injures, we get resented. And that resentment in our mind keeps on building till the time we have a tendency to react in inappropriate way. So key is, if somebody behaves in that particular way, try to consider that maybe he had a bad day, she had a bad day, and forgive that person because you certainly know some good qualities in that individual. So instead of getting the resentment extending further down to anger and hatred, we can always find something positive in that individual and then make sure that you gradually decrease your resentment and accept the person in a nicer way. Look at it this way. If a child behaves improperly with the mother, for example, the baby is being held and baby keeps on kicking the mom, mom still holds the baby closer to her heart. So you have to accept to make sure that sometimes the behavior in the other individuals has to be dealt in an appropriate way. And what can you find good qualities in other individuals? If the individual takes care of his own children, takes care of his own parents, gives money to charities, then you recognize that some good qualities are present in that individual. So it's very important to make sure that using that technique, you'll be able to make certain that your internal uncleanness is gone, that resentment and anger that comes out of it. Other thing you can think about is we sometimes tend to be inconsiderate towards other people. I mentioned about selfishness. And selfishness, of course, is we want more and more and more without taking into consideration that other individuals might want too. I'll tell you from my point of view, if there's a last piece of laddu or last piece of burfi, sometimes individuals have a tendency to go and put their hand first. But it would be more appropriate if somebody takes time and makes certain that somebody else does not want it before accepting it. Other way I try to find the inner cleanliness more effective is abhyas, satsanga, seva, and prarthana. Let me explain. Study the way we all of us are doing together as a group. Make certain that we are supporting one another and making certain that we understand this is inappropriate and correct your behavior. Satsanga is being in a group, supporting one another, so that if somebody goes astray, we gently correct him. I don't need to tell you about excessive attachment leading to addictions. We have talked in the past about controlling our anger. Greed it may be acceptable on the movie Wall Street, but greed is totally inappropriate. We should enjoy what we need, but should not have excessive greed. I briefly comment on selfishness. When talked to Matsarya, in Sanskrit word, you can divide that as parotkarsham društva jayamana santapa. The anger that arises, santapa jayamana. Društam, having seen what? Having seen somebody's success, somebody's excellence, somebody's superiority, somebody gets angry, and that basically is matsar. We have to remember that everyone is good in something or the other. God has given each individual something wonderful quality that we have to recognize. And if we recognize that this individual has been blessed with a special quality, we should support, congratulate him, and be friends with him rather than being jealous about it. When we study together as a group, interact, discuss between each other, we get certain amount of understanding and realize as to what our true nature is. And as we advance through these studies, we'll come to recognize our true nature is Sat Chit Ananda. That means we will be existent in the future as we are in the present, and we may not remember it. We're present in the past as well. We'll recognize that we have knowledge and awareness, and we are a part and parcel of limitlessness, joy, that is Ananda and Anant. And once we come to learn that, jealousy is totally unfounded and unjustified. in that situation. Sometimes the studies are done better as a group, not because we are necessarily lazy all the time, but every once in a while we go through the biological cycles where our energy level is diminished. But if you are in a buddy system or a group of friends like us, we meeting together, we can push one another and make certain we'll continue to study and pray together. So that brings us to the prayers. Just have the faith to start with, that all these prayers are going to gain us that knowledge. Now, if you have doubts, then you'll have a problem because your mind will be going in 10 different directions. Just like you are, as a baby, trying to get in the water to swim, and your mother or father is holding his hands out and saying, "Oh, hey, jump up, jump down, I'll catch you." You have that faith and the confidence in the individual who is going to protect you. The same thing applies when we're discussing in a group like this, where the group of friends discussing, some who have studied for a longer time, some not as long, but by supporting and having trust in one another, you'll be able to do that very easily. So prayers are absolutely essential. I can tell you from my personal experience, that has benefited the most. And it doesn't have to be any fancy. Whatever the prayer that feels close to you, that makes sense to you, has helped you all your life, start with it. Sometimes people have some family traditions of singing certain number of prayers, certain kind of prayers. Another favorite prayer of mine, besides what we talked about, Pasaidan from Dhaneshwar and some shlokas from Ramdas, Gita is my favorite prayer book. Sing at least one chapter a day, if not more. Another favorite of mine is Gayatri Mantra. Sing them at least once, if not at least up to 21 times. That's my average. And of course, you can take 24 names of all the 24 names of Sri Krishna. But even if you take 3 names of Govinda, that will be a great help. As a matter of fact, 3 names I picked out today for discussion was Achyuta. Achyuta is the Lord who never wanes, the Lord who does not undergo any change whatsoever, remains constant, Lord who is eternal, Achyutayana. Another favorite of mine is Anantayana. Ananta is one who has no end, no unanta, eternal, one who is limitless, and Ananta is appears in the form of the entire creation. Another favorite word of mine is Govinda. I hope Prasanna is listening, but the book that she has shared with me after speaking on Vishnu Sahasranam is still in my library, and it appears in the 187th and 539th word in the Vishnu Puran, and it means various entities, including earth, cows, speech, and Vedas. So there are different meanings of the same word, Govinda. So we should try to say these 4 words, Achyutayana, Anantayana, Govindayana. So basically, these are some of the places. Doesn't matter, even if small amount is able to done every day, that will help you absolutely, if tremendously. Can tell you from my personal experience. I will stop at this stage because I got one more topic I want to cover. But let me stop after discussing this part of Shaucham and see if Prasanna has any comments or anybody else has comments or questions.
Thank you. Om Achyutaya Namaha. Om Anantaya Namaha. Om Govindaya Namaha. It comes in Om Achyutananta Govinda Namocharana Bheshajat Nashyanti Sakala Rogaha Satyam Satyam Vadamiham. So reciting Om Achyutaya Namaha, Om Anantaya Namaha, Om Govindaya Namaha will protect you from all kinds of diseases. That's one of the Dhanvantari shlokas. very, very important shloka. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Mhm.
In terms of the shaucham, you talked about the external cleanliness as well as internal cleanliness, and internal shaucham encompasses so much. You mentioned kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya.
Exactly.
Yeah, and arjavam is also shaucham inside the mind. We talked about arjavam earlier, straightforwardness, and pretension is all absence of pretension is also a clearly internal shaucham. We talked about that in amanitvam, adambitvam. So many of the qualities that you described are encompassed in one word, shaucham. And that's very interesting because you probably can see the internal cleanliness of the mind is so important. And the way to get that internal cleanliness, as you mentioned, is to one of the approaches is to pratipaksha bhavana. So that is the cessation of the impurity or the wandering of the mind. It's not suppression, mind you. It is not suppression of the mind. It is a conscious decision to not think about things that are not conducive for your peace and tranquility, but to focus your attention on whatever mantra is or whatever God is, but on some noble thoughts. That's the one. That is the hardest part because the mind is so easily distracted, so easily distracted. It takes tremendous amount of practice and conscious effort not to fall prey to that one. Arjuna recognized that very well. He said, conquering the mind is like catching the wind in a net, in a butterfly net, almost impossible. But Krishna assures him it is possible by abhyasa. Abhyasa is practice. That is the hardest thing. So we really have to discipline ourselves. And in the current situation that we are in the general societal environment that we are in, that becomes much more difficult because we're constantly distracted by so many things that we really need to pay attention to our screen time. What is it that you're trying to do with your cell phone all the time? And so it is a challenge. And particularly for younger people, it's a challenge. And what is the best way to inculcate this practice of self-examination to younger people? I don't know the answer. Just lecturing to them is not going to work. It's got to be something that should be done at the level of their understanding so that they discover for themselves the advantages of shaucham. So that's the comment I have to make. The other comment I have to make is that in the Christian tradition, you have the 10 commandments, the do's and don'ts. And for all the people who are in the audience, here's my challenge. Get hold of a copy of the Holy Bible and find out exactly where the 10 commandments are spoken. Read the verse before the 10 commandments were spoken and the verse after the 10 commandments were spoken. You will learn a lot. You will learn a lot. So I'm sure if you don't have a copy of the Holy Bible, I'm sure you could borrow it from one of your Christian neighbors. And we do also have the don'ts and do's, like the 10 commandments, which is the yama niyama. Yamas are the don'ts and the niyamas are the do's. There are 10 of them. And there are 20 do's and don'ts in what Dr. Sane is discussing. And in chapter 11 of the Bhagavad Gita, it is the Daivasara Sampat Vibhaga Yoga. In the Daivi Sampat, there are values that you have to follow. And in the Asari Sampat, there are values that you have to eschew or discard or throw away. So throughout the Bhagavad Gita, we have instances of all of these things. But I'm sure we can condense all of them into a manageable set of values that we can focus our attention on. One of those is, of course, the yama niyama. If you practice yama niyama and observe them, I think all the other values that we have talked about fall in line in one form or the other. That's all I have to say, Shishi.
But Prasanna, absolutely. That's exactly what I wanted you to come in and comment on those things. I think one thing I thought I would add into that cleanliness part about it is from the 17th chapter of Gita. So he says, Anudvega karam vakyam satyam priyatam chayat swadhyaya abhyasanam chaiva vangmayam tapa uchyate.
Yeah.
So it's a speech which does not cause agitation, which is true, which is pleasing, which is beneficial, and daily repetitions of one from one of the Vedas, that is the cleanliness of speech. So the keeping that cleanliness of speech also is an important of shaucha. And I might conclude that section by he says, Mana prasada saumatvam, maunam atma-vinigraha, bhava samshuddhi iti atapo manasam uchyate. 16th verse. Mental cheerfulness, cheerfulness in expression, absence of pressure to talk, mastery over the mind, clean intent, this together is called the mental discipline, comes to the expression of words and actions. So that cleanness is equally important for us. And that brings us to the next topic of sthairyam. Okay?
Sthairyam, yeah, fortitude. Yeah.
Yeah. Sthairyam means firmness or steadiness, steadfastness. I might take you a little different way. Kalidas describing says, Idam shariram dharma sadhanam. Kalidas is a tremendous poet, and but at the same time, since we are all taken, even though I'm wearing the saffron dress outside myself, I'm still not a sannyasi, I'm still a samsari. So we come as samsari with char purusharthas: dharma, artha, kama, moksha. But once you realize that you enjoyed the pleasures of life, created the security and material possessions through artha and friends circle in a righteous way, dharma, only thing that remains, or perhaps the most important that remains, is the moksha. And if we want to achieve that ultimate stage of liberation from being something different than what God already has given us, that is the important part, comes only through maintaining the firmness and steadfastness, and not till the time the goal is achieved. For example, if you remember Dhruva, when Narada told him to say Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, keep on singing till the time you conclude your objective, you don't give up. So failure is not an option. So he basically was able to continue that. And that's what exactly I hope for. Friend circle here continues in that objective and not stopping till the time we're able to do it. Basically, you need to have karmanishta and swadharmanishta. That means steadfastness in action and commitment to our own duty. It also needs constancy and perseverance. Maybe somewhere down the road, I'll talk on a topic of success sometimes. Most of us, I always criticism with me, are aramba shura. That means they're very brave, honest, forthright to start the things, but they have a tendency not to complete it. They join the health clubs, but they spend most of the time when they are in the clubs socializing, not doing for the objective that they went. They sit down for meditation session, they join meditation classes, but after a little while, they drop out. They attend the discourses sometimes, but sometimes the overnight party prevents them from participating in the discourses. So the thing is, once you think it's important to do, you maintain firm discipline and carry it through completely. And that's why, again, as I mentioned before, you have to be in the form of a group, satsangatve nitsangam. Only when you maintain the company of good people with similar values, similar positive values you have, then you're able to reach that, the ultimate goal. So it's not important. It's important not to have aramba shura only. To continue on what Prasanna had mentioned about the stadium, we can extend it further where it's not just enough to have the tendency of yama niyama, but you got to proceed further through listening to various people, shravana, reflecting on it in the form manana, nididhyasana, and dhyana. That's the only way to continue individuals' education to achieve the ultimate goal that we have set of Atma-Jnana. So this is important, and that comes only through a steady, persistent goal, persistent efforts to achieve the ultimate goal. So we have covered so far Stairyam and Shaucham. Because remember, the reason I'm beginning firm and maintaining that this is essential is not a limited knowledge. When I talk about Atma-Jnana, is knowledge is a total knowledge of everything. And I'll come to that. I'll discuss the Atma-Vinigraha. Now, Atma-Vinigraha is mastery over mind, self-restraint. Now, when we use Atma, in this particular adjective, one should try to use that Atma in a loose sense. But I mean, say, when we identify ourselves, our physical body as I, so you have to maintain control, mastery of our own body, what our physical activities are well controlled. We also have vital functions of our mind. We call it as my mind. We have to have control of the mind. So mana, buddhi, chitta, and last but not the least, ahankara. So Atma-Vinigraha is control of your physical behavior, control of your thought behavior, thinking about intellectual studies, expression in the Vivek Buddhi, and last but not the least, control of your ahankara. When you're able to control all those four entities of mana, buddhi, chitta, ahankara, you're able to reach part of the Atma-Vinigraha, and you have to continue that till the time you're able to achieve the samadhi during the performing the meditation process. The only way I've been successful in some way is being deliberate. That means purposeful. What I'm going to say is, if I'm going to do it, I want to put my head down, concentrate, and continue plow through. So deliberation in the behavior has helped me a great deal, and I would strongly urge you to do that. Now, what happens is, when we try to concentrate your mind, body, and intellect, we come up with positive thoughts because we are working on that topic to develop that particular quality. So we are careful as to what we accept and carry through. Be careful as to what not to accept and dismiss it. But when you get full Atma control, Atma-Jnana, all things that come out from your mind are automatically good. Your mind thinks positively, appropriately. Even your intellect directs you properly, and you carry out the actions without even thinking, because you have got the ultimate knowledge. And other thing which is, you can do it is shama, dhamma, and ultimately concentration of the mind, samadhana. Now you have to make certain that you control your various physical activities, control your thoughts, control your temptations. And if you tend to go there, I understand it, but then drop it right away. So that is shama. And then one has to control his activities, dhamma, where you are not able to act in an appropriate way, and make sure you control all your senses, what you speak, what you hear, what kind of music you want to hear, or what the activity you want to do. And then, as I mentioned to you, chitta etagrita, that means that's the way to find a satisfaction, by maintaining a positive single goal to achieve and follow the method of that young man, young boy, Dhruva, till the time you're able to get that intense concentration of the mind. So we covered 2, 3 topics today. I don't want to overload it, because what I would like you to do is reflect on these